Scientia ABC Time.
Welcome to Scientia ABC Time, Awesome Book Clique. Today, we will be reading another chapter from the book Fairy Tales Treasury, called The Magician's Horse. Let's begin.
Scientia ABC Time, Awesome Book Clique.
It was the first day of spring, and all across Persia, people were celebrating. They danced and laughed and picnicked in the warm sunshine. And beneath the golden domes of his palace, the Sultan was greeting his people. Among the crowd were many inventors and wise men. The Sultan loved learning, and it was his custom to reward anyone who brought him a new invention. The palace steps were piled with curious clocks and intriguing astronomical instruments. When a man appeared, leading a horse, he pushed his way rudely to the front. The man had a crooked body and cold eyes, but the horse was magnificent. It had a glossy ebony-black coat, and its saddle sparkled with jewels. But there was something strange about it. It stepped stiffly, without looking left or right. "Just like clockwork," said Prince Kamar, the Sultan's son. "It's not a real horse. Look, it's carved out of wood." The man addressed the Sultan. "Your Majesty has seen many wonders," he began, "but I promise you have never seen anything as wonderful as my horse." The Sultan examined the animal. "I see only a moving statue," he observed. "Very lifelike, it is true, but surely any sculptor might do as much." "I am not a sculptor. I am a magician, and my horse is no statue. I have only to wish myself somewhere, anywhere, and in a few moments I am there. Allow me to show you." The Sultan nodded, curious. "There," he said, pointing at a distant peak surrounded by trees. "Bring me a leaf from a tree at the foot of that mountain." The magician sat in the saddle and touched the horse's side, where a tiny lever was hidden. At once, it tossed its head and sprang into the air. It flashed overhead and vanished into the distance. Moments later, it reappeared over the palace and landed softly. The magician presented a leaf to the Sultan. "Astonishing!" cried the Sultan. "I've never seen anything like it. This horse will be the pride of my treasure house. Name your reward. What shall it be? Gold? Jewels?" "No, sire. I only desire one thing, to become a prince." Prince Kamar broke out laughing. "Don't be ridiculous." The magician glared at the prince and folded his arms stubbornly. The Sultan hesitated. "Let me try the horse before you decide anything," suggested Kamar. "After all, it may not work for anyone else." The Sultan nodded. So Kamar mounted the magnificent steed, and the magician showed him how to take off, but deliberately said nothing about landing. "If he disappears, I can inherit his title," he thought with a greedy smile. As soon as Kamar touched the lever, the horse leaped into the air, soaring higher and higher until it was lost from sight. Everyone waited expectantly for his return. Minutes passed. More minutes. An hour, until it began to grow dark. The Sultan turned to the magician. What have you done with my son?" The magician shrugged. "He was too impatient. He took off before I could explain how to land." The Sultan frowned. He had better come back safely. Your life shall depend on it. Guards, lock this man up until my son returns." For his part, Kamar was greatly enjoying his ride. He watched, amazed, as the land unfolded below, with its craggy mountains, green plains, and rivers like rippling silver ribbons, and beyond them, strange towns and cities. Eventually, as the sun began to sink, he decided it was time to go home. He pressed the lever again. The horse only rose higher. With a jolt, he realized he did not know how to land. "I'll just have to work it out," he told himself. Calmly, he examined the horse, running his fingers over the polished ebony. He found a second lever on the far side. As soon as he touched it, the horse began to descend, coming to rest on a high marble balcony. By now, the sky was an inky dark, pierced only by twinkling stars. "Where am I?" wondered the prince, jumping down. He peered in at the nearest window and saw a chamber filled with lilies and lotus flowers and lit by delicately scented candles. In the middle, on silken cushions, sat the most beautiful lady he had ever seen. She had long, dark hair and warm, dark eyes, which blinked in amazement to see Kamar. "I must be dreaming," she exclaimed. "I assure you, lady, I am no dream," Kamar replied, "although my story is just as strange." And he told her how he had been carried away by the magician's horse. "Yesterday, I was the Prince of Persia. Now I find myself in strange lands, perhaps in danger, at the mercy of a beautiful stranger." "You are in my lands," the lady replied, "and you are in no danger. I am the Princess Shema. My maids will bring you food and show you where you may sleep." The prince nodded gratefully. Kamar and the princess spent all of the next day together, and the next, and the next. Neither of them had ever met someone whose company delighted them so much. On the fourth day, the prince asked the princess to marry him. "Nothing would make me happier," she said, smiling. But his next words made her face fall. "Now I must leave you," he went on. "My father will be worried and I must let him know I am safe. But I will return here as soon as I can, for I cannot be happy without you. Indeed, were it not such a fearful journey, I would take you with me." "I'm not afraid of flying," insisted the princess. So when Kamar mounted the ebony horse again, the princess was right behind him. Even with two riders, it flew just as swiftly as before, and Kamar soon saw the familiar domes of his father's palace. The Sultan greeted them with delight. As the days had passed, he had begun to fear he would never see his son again. He was thrilled to have Kamar safely back and to meet his beautiful bride. After hearing the story, the Sultan gave orders to prepare the wedding celebrations at once. "Oh, and release the magician too," he added. The magician was furious about his time in prison. "How dare they lock me up?" he thought bitterly, choosing to forget how he had plotted against the prince. "It is all Kamar's fault, flying away with my horse like that, and now he comes back with a bride. Well, we'll see about that." But he was cunning enough to hide his spite. "A wedding," he said aloud. "How wonderful! The princess should ride to the ceremony on the ebony horse. And this time, I will guide it myself to ensure there are no mishaps." The hour arrived, and the princess trustingly mounted the horse with the magician. At his touch, the horse halted up. "Slow down," gasped the princess, but the magician only laughed and flew faster, right past the waiting prince. "Come back," called Kamar, but the wind whipped his words away. Eventually, the horse landed in a distant forest. The princess gripped the magician's arm. "Take me back at once." "No," he said. "You'll never see your prince again." "Help! Please, someone help me!" she shouted. "Scream all you like," he sneered. "There's no one to hear you." But he was wrong. "What's going on?" demanded a huge man dressed in furs, pushing his way through the undergrowth. It was a bandit chief named Haman, out hunting from his castle. "Oh, my wife and I were just having an argument," lied the magician quickly. "That's not true," cried the princess. This man is not my husband. I am a princess and he kidnapped me. Looking into her beautiful eyes, Haman had no doubt what to do. Seize the scoundrel, he told his bandits. As for the princess, he bowed and invited her to his castle, and she accepted, little realizing that Haman had no plans to let her go again. At the castle, the princess ate and slept and woke refreshed to hear the servants chattering about a wedding. Who's getting married? She asked curiously. Why, you are, came the reply. Lucky you, marrying the chief himself. She bit her lip. How can I get out of this? She wondered. All of a sudden, she fell to the ground. She fainted with delight, cried the servants, running over. The princess opened her eyes and began babbling. No, she's delirious, said another. Fetch the doctors. But the doctors couldn't help, and little wonder, since she was only pretending to be ill to avoid Haman. In despair, he ordered his servants to look after her and offered to reward anyone who could bring about a cure. Meanwhile, Prince Kamar had set off in search of his beloved. Everywhere he went, he asked the same question. Have you seen a princess, a magician, and an ebony horse? Most people laughed and shook their heads, but eventually, one man paused. I was passing a bandit's castle when I heard a curious story, he told Kamar. They say the bandit chief, Haman, rescued the princess from a magician with an ebony horse. She was so beautiful, Haman was determined to marry her. But she fell into madness before they could hold the ceremony. Now, he has offered to reward anyone who cures her. But it is no good. She's completely crazy. Shema, thought the prince, fired with hope. It must be. And he asked the way to the castle. A few days later, a man dressed like a doctor knocked at the castle. I've come to cure the princess, he said. He was shown in to the princess, who merely pretended to faint. But he whispered something in her ear, and just as suddenly, she sat up and smiled. Amazing, cried the bandits. He must be a great doctor. Now leave us, said Kamar, for it was he. I must finish examining the lady in private. As soon as they were alone, the young couple worked out a plan. First, the doctor went to see Haman. To cure the princess fully, I must know a little more about her history and how she came to your lands, he said. She arrived here on a magical horse, said Haman glumly. Why do you ask? Aha, that's the cause of her madness. The horse's magic has passed into her and made her sick. But I can cure her if you bring me the horse and the princess together tomorrow. Eagerly, Haman agreed. The next morning, the bandits brought out the horse, and Haman himself helped the princess into the saddle. Then they all stood back and watched as the doctor lit a bonfire of herbs, chanting strangely. Thick, scented smoke curled upwards, hiding the horse from view. It was the moment Kamar had been waiting for. He leaped onto the horse behind Shema and pressed the lever. If a princess seeks your protection, he called as they soared into the sky, you shouldn't force her to marry you. That's no doctor, Haman yelled. Seize them! But it was too late. The horse had flown away. So Kamar and Shema returned to Persia and were married to great rejoicing. And the magical ebony horse was given pride of place in the Sultan's treasure house. As for the magician and the bandit chief, they were left with nothing but disappointment, which is all that they deserved. The end. And that is the end of the story. Thank you very much for watching.
Scientia ABC Time. Awesome book click.